In today's video, we're going to weave paper strips to create some backgrounds for the card fronts. When you're making cards, typically with the card base, you just cut the paper in half and you get 2 cards out of it, so you use up the whole sheet. But when it comes to putting the paper inside, you want the card to be 4 inches wide, card length 5.5, you want 5 1/4. And what that does is it leaves you with some leftover strips of paper. See, I'm going to have an extra 1/2 inch strip here and a 1/2 inch strip here. And so what happens is you're going to have a whole collection of strips, 1/2 inch strips. And because we typically use a lot of white for the card insert, most of them are going to be white. So what do we do with all of these scraps? That is what I'm endeavoring to do. So this is what you have left. These pieces fit just perfectly, so that you have a nice little frame of the base color there. And so you'll be able to use them up in 4 cards, but then you have these leftover pieces that are just going to pile up and collect. So we need to find ways to use these strips. Since I have figured out that I prefer 1/4 inch strips as opposed to 1/2 inch. When I cut out my card inserts, I just go ahead, I cut 1/4 inch from my extra strips so that I have them already cut. And I cut those first because when you're cutting something small, it is usually easier when you've got a big piece of paper that you can hold on to cut off the 2 ends. Then I cut these out. In this video, I'm going to show you how to weave a backdrop, and I'm going to show 4 ways on how I used it as a backdrop for card design. Plus, I share some assembly tips, some coloring tips, and some principles of color to help you in designing your cards to bring it up to a master level. When we make cards, we tend to have way too many white scraps left over. Over time, those white strips pile up. I have a 12-inch bin where I always throw my long leftover strips, and occasionally I use them specifically for designing card backdrops. I have several videos where I have used those strips to design card backs. Here are the thumbnails of some of those videos. You will find them on my card making playlist. I try to share useful and helpful tips on how to get organized and maximizing your paper scraps, because my goal is to use up all my scraps before I cut up new papers. I am reducing my scrap storage so that it does not become overwhelming. The only new paper I will cut up are the bases, but when you do that, you cut the paper in half and you create 2 card bases. So you have no leftover pieces because you're using the whole sheet. Today, I'm going to only work with the white strips, and we're going to weave them for a design element for card backgrounds. I use washi tape to hold my vertical strips in place while I weave. My pattern this time is 2 and 2 and 2. That means 2 under, 2 over, repeating all the way through. Both my vertical and horizontal strips are 2 and 2 and 2. You will see why I'm doing 2, 2, and 2 in just a minute. It'll make sense then. Here is a close-up of the weave. You could use it just like that if you like, and that's nice, but I have another plan. Now I am pulling out every other strip, leaving a gap between each row. Observe the washi tape is holding the vertical strips while I pull out the horizontal strips. I am also holding the weave with my left hand so I don't pull out the ones that I want to remain. Now I tape down the horizontal strips so that I can remove the vertical strips. I use washi tape because it has a low tack. It won't tear the paper when I remove it like other tapes can. I stick the tape down on my work surface because I will use it over and over again until I finish using up all my white strips for this weaving session. Then I pull out every other vertical strip. I adjust the spaces between my strips. I try to make the empty spaces look even. It's not going to be perfect. I check my length and width. I aim for about 6 inches long by 4 to 4.5 inches wide because I am always conservative about the usage of my paper. Even my scrap strips, I realign them so that I can cut off a longer length on one side. Then I retape, having at least 3 sides taped down. Now it is time to secure everything in place. I will be gluing, so I slip my silicone gluing mat under the edge that I'll be working on. I grabbed one of my 1/2-inch white strips to glue on the end. I try to do all my gluing on the silicone mat so that my workspace stays free of glue. I do the same for each side. I use tacky glue, which is an all-purpose glue. I like it because it dries fairly quickly, which also means less of a sticky workspace, and my hands don't become sticky. I have tried other glues and was just not happy with them. Glue sticks disappoint me, so I don't use them anymore because things come unglued. Other glues remain too sticky, and then I have to stop crafting and go wash my hands. Tacky glue dries on my hands and peels right off. I know there are others who swear by not using a liquid glue, but I have become used to using this glue, and I can dot it on very lightly so I don't have any issues with my paper buckling unless I use thinner paper. I do prefer to work with cardstock, so buckling is a non-issue. Tacky glue is a thicker glue, but I apply it very thinly with little dots. Finally, I trim off the extra edges. This is how many I was able to make with my white strips. You probably have observed that they're not all the same size, and nor are they perfect. Now it's time to fine-tune them to fit the cards. I go to my rectangular die cuts from waffle flour to help me cut them to size. The largest die in this set is the perfect size for a card base. Only one of them fit perfectly into this cut. The others I had to do some modifications to, but cutting a smaller frame to go around them. And one, it just would not do at all. So I cut it in half on the diagonal. I even find a way to work with things that are messed up. You'll see how it turns out in the end. For the first card, I chose to do white on white, just because I wanted to see how that would look. The open spaces and the shadows it would create will add dimension to the card. To emphasize the dimension, I pulled out my double-sided foam strips to lift my grid pattern above the white background. Oops! When you cut the grid, you may have to re-glue some loose ends. Yes, I like how that looks, but I think it needs more foam strips. I did every other row, which seemed like a good plan. My rows are uneven numbers, so I added just one more row. There, that should do it. I removed the backing on the center strips, but only pulled up a small edge on the outer rim. This way I can better place my card in the right place before peeling off all the stickers. Once in place, I pulled off the rest of the backing. That looks good. A great backdrop for a starting place. Now for the embellishments. This design makes me think of a lattice, so I'm thinking flowers will work with them. Looking through my stash, I found this lovely rose that I had purchased on a digital download and printed with my printer. Yes, that looks lovely. Some rose varieties need a trellis to climb on, so that works. I am lifting the image to glue only on the top lines of the trellis so I don't pour glue to the inside spaces. I have to do this methodically to get it fully attached. I do like that shadow effect of the open spaces. It adds a nice texture to the card, a different element. We'll definitely have to repeat this type of card again sometime. How lovely. Simple, soft, and sweet. All it needs is a sentiment. Oops, I goofed. My first thought was a portrait card, but when I added the sentiment, I placed it with a landscape orientation. Oh well, it still works as a card. I decided to carry a sliver of peach to the inside of the card as well. I don't usually add an extra paper behind the inside message, especially for a white base, but this card seemed to require it. Next card. I tested this white grid on different backgrounds. It doesn't seem to work well on patterned papers. The pattern gets lost with all the white, so solid colors worked best. Then I went through all of my stamps to pick out some flowers. I started with larger flowers, but not too big. Sometimes I just sit down and stamp and punch and paint or color multiple flowers just for fun. I save them in a box for ready-made images. I found this rose print that I had printed with paint some time back from a block print that I actually designed and carved myself. It works well with the red and white, but it still needed something more. I got an idea. Maybe I could weave in some green quilling strips. Let's try it. I did one side and looked at it. Needs more. Let's try another. It's not glued in. If I don't like it, I could still pull it out. What if we turned it the other way? It's okay for the rose to cover part of the green. I then decided to go all the way around to make a frame. It is pretty easy to weave the quilling strips in and easier to take them out. I'm not going to glue or cut anything until I decide that I like it. Yes, I like it. I really wanted the leaves to lay over the wide part of the frame, even though the rose hides most of the green strips. The other lines tells the story of the frame. Our eyes naturally do that. We tend to connect the lines that are missing. So it is decided. Now we must cut and glue the ends of the green quilling strips. They go over one under one in the typical weave. But in the end, I decided it best for the outermost part of the line to cross out onto the white frame. Now we're ready to attach the grid to the card base. Now the rose. I decided this would be a thank you card. It would be like giving a rose to a friend who did something nice for you. But it had to have a backing for contrast. That tiny sliver of red peeking around the circle is just enough to set it off from the white grid. Love to have a little contrast. I did a second card similar to the previous one, but on a green background with the same rose print that I had added some coloring to it with colored pencils. And this card seemed to tell me that it was a sympathy card. Yeah, paper speaks to me. Colors speak to me. Arrangement speaks to me. I'm constantly analyzing what it is I'm doing. That's the artist in me. Here's the block that I carved. I wish that I had left it alone after the first print, but I cleaned it up so that it now is just an outline of the design. I think I overdid it, because the initial print wasn't bad. Oh well, live and learn. I may try to recarve it again someday. The arrangement of the leaves make it a perfect rose to sit in a corner, and it is the right size for the size cards I make too. On to the next card, because I must show you how I use the woven grid pattern and show you different ways to use it. Here are some stamped flowers that I'm coloring with colored pencils. I picked up the stamp set at a yard sale and got it really cheap. It's probably no longer available. I'm sure it is old, but I find myself going back to it again and again. It prints so nice, and coloring them is also easy. You just follow the lines. Where you see more lines, that is a shadow. So I apply more color, a deeper, darker value. Where there are less lines or no lines, color very lightly and use less color, and you will have a perfectly shaded flower that has 2 dimensions. I don't always stamp my flowers with black ink because black is too harsh of a color and ruins the realism of something as gentle as a flower. This particular stamp, because of its lines, it would be even worse if it was printed with black ink. I knew I wanted blue flowers, so I used a dark blue ink. The day I printed this flower, I also experimented with other color inks and stamped a bunch of this flower pattern to be colored later. I printed a rust ink for yellow flowers, dark pink for pink flowers. I would use dark violet for either light purple or red flowers. The little flowers are colored the same. They have an obviously dark side and a light side. When placing them on a card, the darker side should be on the bottom and the lighter side facing up where it will receive the light. I am an artist, so I understand these principles. This really is a quality stamp set from Stampin' Up. I don't know if you can even find it, maybe used on Amazon if you happen to like it. Sometimes people resell their stock. I have purchased used patterns from Amazon several times. I fussy cut out the flowers because obviously I don't have a die that matches it. This is my collection of pre-cut leaves. I often will take my tiny scraps after a card making session and just cut out leaves, flowers, or butterflies before throwing away the tiniest bits of scrap because I really like to maximize as much use out of the paper as I possibly can. I like to keep leaves in different shades of green because each color arrangement may need a different shade of green. For this grid, I cut out an extra frame to glue behind it just to give a little lift. Now we begin the placement of the flowers and leaves. I try different options and try to make an interesting arrangement. I don't want it to look too static. I avoid placing them in a straight line. Nature is always randomly placed. I decided that one flower should be lifted above the others. So after placing all the flowers, I added dimensions on the back side of the flower to stand out. There. Very nice. It just needs a sentiment. The next card is similar, but I used a different, larger flower. I like to mix up my sets. I don't always work out of the same set. With this card, I'm using 3 different sets. I felt this purple card needed some yellow flowers in it because yellow is complementary to purple. The same way green is complementary to red. Understanding the principle of colors, complements, and stuff like that is useful in card making. I decided that this purple needed some yellow flowers, and they needed to be small yellow flowers because I want the roses larger. I first cut the flowers out in light green and then the same in yellow. Then snipped off just the flower tips that I can add them on top of the green stems. These flowers are very tiny, so I used some special tools to glue them on. First, I placed a spot of glue on a small piece of cardstock. Then, using the tip of a toothpick, that's my fancy tool, I place the glue where the tiny flowers will sit. Then I use a special tool that has a sticky tip to pick up such tiny things so that I can place them just where I want them. The other end has a point to help me adjust the placement. I forgot what this tool is called, but it came from Stampin' Up. Maybe someone in the comments can tell me what it's called. See how nice that worked out? This adds a bit more color to our purple card. Just a note, this purple I thought was a fairly dark shade, but adding a white grid onto it makes it seem so much lighter, and that will be with any color. The white grid will lighten up a color, so don't feel bad about choosing a very dark background. We need leaves, so back to my leaf collection. No, this color's too light. Need a darker color. Ah, yes, I like that color better. I guess because the flower is light and the background appears to be light, so a darker green brings in more contrast, which helps pull it all together. Oh, this color is too blue. We'll stick with the medium olive green. I don't know if that's the name of the color or not. I don't pay much attention to that. I just look at the colors and make decisions based on them. After playing with all the parts to get an idea of how I want them arranged, I'm ready to glue them in place. We start with the things that should be behind, working our way forward. This leaf is the same color as the other, but it doesn't have the darker outer edges like the other leaf, and I didn't feel like searching for that color and preparing it the same way. So I just decided to just grab a marker and add some lines to it. I keep holding up the big flower, the main flower, to make sure it doesn't hide what I don't want hidden. I play with my pieces as I try to decide the best arrangement. If I'm going to place two small flowers together like this, they need some small leaves to help unite them as though they grew off of the same branch. Looks like I got company. This is my cat Shito, my crafting buddy. She typically joins me at my workstation. She and her sister have turned my camera mount into a scratching post. Don't worry, it's just made out of 2x4s, nothing of real value. I almost have this card finished, but I think she wants some attention. Just like the last card, I want the main flower to pop up, so I add some dimensions to the back side of it. But first, I need to glue this onto our card base. Oop, she is being persistent. I better clear my desk up, or small things will disappear and become a cat's toy. That is how I lose glue caps and pens. These card fronts are done except for the sentiment. She wants me. Now she's really taken over my space. She is asking for a belly rub. I'm picking out a sentiment for the last two cards. I look through my notebook where the sentiments are arranged by categories: anniversaries, romance, friendship, birthdays. I have decided they will be birthday cards, and I want a sentiment that won't take up much space. That one will work, I think. I chose one and see if it works with my cards. Okay, now to pull out the die cut and then the stamp. Everything is labeled so I can quickly find it. Now I need to pull out a small scrap of color from my scrap bin. White on white. We need a contrast. Back to my scrap bin where I keep tiny bits of color. I have a video showing you how I made this scrap bin. It sits on my desktop, and it's the first place I go when I need small bits of color. When my card making session is done and I have small bits left over, I square them up and they go back in to my scrap bin. Here are the stamp sets that I used for these two cards. Now, on to our final two cards. I chose this stamp set. I decided to go with slightly smaller flowers for these two cards. Again, I printed in dark blue ink because I want my flowers to be red. You're thinking, then why choose blue? Red and blue make purple. Purple is a good shadow color for red. Green and blue makes a blue-green or a darker green. And so I think about those things as I'm choosing what color ink to stamp my image. Again, I avoid black. I use a light green to color the centers of the leaves, and then I go around the outer edges with a darker green, because it's nice to have a two-tone image. I do color over the blue ink. When coloring the red flowers, I color every single part of the flower, including the inked blue, which will just make the shadows look dark purple. Yellow and blue makes green. I could have chose maybe a slightly lighter blue ink. This is a newer set from Stampin' Up, and I do have the dies with it. My box says free, so I must have earned it free through hosting a class or on some special hostess offer. I don't remember. The roses look great. I need some other flowers. So I chose these even smaller flowers and decided to color them yellow. I am making good use of my scrap bin today. I was able to cut 4 grasses from this scrap. I printed it in cinnamon ink. I think that's the name of the color. I always like to use more than one color to color anything. 2 shades of green on the leaves. The flowers are yellow with touches of orange on the bases, the bottom of the flower, and inside the blossom. Sort of a light brown. I always choose an ink darker than the color that I want the flowers to be. Now for the arrangement. I added a little bee from that same set. Just one more touch. So these are all the cards that I made using up my white strips into a woven grid. The first one is very sweet. The second 2 are bold. These 2 are pleasant because of their colors and arrangement. And for my dud grid, the one that didn't work out so well, that I cut in half, I think the cards turned out nice anyway. Which ones do you like best? Well, I hope this gives you some inspiring ideas and you come up with some original designs of your own. Thanks for watching. I will link my video about weaving strips for card backgrounds at the end of this video. To see more ideas for using up white scraps, see this video for creative ideas.